You got to just have faith in that the floor is going to still hold while you're walking around, and then also that the people are going to do their thing. And I like that you said, if it isn't illegal, this and that, because in the long run, the number one thing humans want in this world, work or outside of work, is to be understood.
Welcome to Unspoken Security by ZeroFox, the raw and gritty podcast for cybersecurity professionals who want to understand how threat actors are leveraging the internet. In each episode, your host AJ Nash engages with various industry experts to dissect current trends, share practical insights, and address the blunt truths surrounding security. Ultimately, the lessons learned will enable security professionals to take an intel-driven, proactive approach to physical and cybersecurity that extends past the perimeter. Let's get started.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Unspoken Security, brought to you by ZeroFox, the only unified external cybersecurity platform. I'm your host, AJ Nash. For those who don't know me personally or are first-time listeners, I'm a traditional intelligence guy who spent nearly 20 years in the intelligence community, both within the U.S. Air Force and then as a defense contractor. Most of that time was spent at NSA. I've been in the private sector for about 8 years now, primarily building or helping other people build effective, intelligence-driven security practices. I'm passionate about intelligence, security, public speaking, mentoring, and teaching. I'm also deeply committed to servant leadership, which is why I completed my master's degree in organizational leadership at Gonzaga University. Go Zags! The goal of this podcast is to bring all of these elements together with some incredible guests and have authentic, unfiltered conversations, even debates, about a wide range of challenging topics most of us are faced with today. This will not be the typical polished podcast. You may hear or see my dog. People may swear here. We may argue or debate, and that's all okay. Think of this podcast as the conversation you might overhear at a bar after a long day at one of the larger cybersecurity conferences. These are the conversations we usually have when nobody's listening. Today, our guest is Lance James, CEO of Unit 221B, a member of several advisory boards, a lifelong troublemaker, but the good kind of trouble, well, mostly, and a dear friend of mine. Lance, to help the audience better connect with you, can you tell us about your background and some of the great work Unit 221B does to take down bad guys?
Sure. I have a long history of being in what we'd call today cybersecurity. I used to call it information security. I think if you're old enough, you used to call it that. Combining counterintelligence with cybersecurity. So I always liked, bridging for example, the feds with the hackers, and we utilize that to chase bad guys. So 221B is the same concept where we work a lot with, whether it's HSI or FBI or whatever. And we actually work to pretty much put some handcuffs to the work we do, right? Recently, and I'm sure these MGM hackers are going to hate it when I say this, but we know who you are. And that's kind of the awesome work we do. And we tend to know most of these new hacks and who they are. If you're a teenager hacking, we know who you are. So it's kind of been an area. And other stuff that we figured out at 221B is when the Twitter got hacked, those kids ended up in jail. That was our work. Handiwork with the FBI and, just a few different ones along the way. I mean, we're always at something. We've also helped some video game companies and deal with online harassment. And we actually even changed the law in Washington State and in Canada for having it so that companies can actually back you up if you are getting harassed online. So yeah, we have a lot of fun. That's pretty much what we do. So.
Very cool. I remember the one you were just talking about, that last bit, right? The law changing. So I know
the bungee one.
Yeah. You and I were talking about that. That was pretty cool. Thanks for sharing the write-up. If people don't know Unit 221B, and a lot of you probably don't, it's kind of a boutique org. These guys are amazing.
Also by design, we don't go around bragging too much. So
yeah, no, absolutely. You guys are amazing. You and Katie and the rest of the team over there. So I mean, I'm a huge fan. Obviously, we've been friends a long time, so of course I'm biased. Everybody knows that. But the work's the work. And I mean, what you guys do is pretty freaking awesome. So, thanks for being on today, man. I mean, I appreciate you coming on here, both as a friend and as an expert. All right. So let's kind of jump into this, right? Let's get into the heart of the discussion. So today's podcast is entitled Stop the World, I Want to Get Off, because security is this 24/7, 365 career, but life, it still happens, man. Bad guys don't take days off. So as a result, almost everyone I know struggles with that mythical work-life balance. I'm notoriously terrible at this. I don't sleep very much. I don't eat very well. You're on me all the time about hydration because I don't do that much. I never go to the gym. Hey, you'll be happy to know I went to the gym yesterday. I didn't do anything. Don't get too excited. But
showing up, it's still that's
right.
Part of it,
That's right. I got a new gym membership and went and took the tour yesterday. And so I'm
I
working
just
on it.
started Aikido like literally on Sunday, and I'm going back today. So
That's awesome.
I told myself I'd get into a martial art. I'm trying to do it. I mean, I'm not into it for the fighting side of it, but more the
Yeah,
fun and just the activity, the cardio. And I finally kicked my butt and said, all right, I'm going.
that's awesome, man. Yeah,
So
I'm
it's
sure.
you're the gym, I'm the Aikido. Like, yay, we
Well,
both
there we
give
go.
us a pat on the back.
We got to keep working on it, right? So, I
Yeah, we
mean,
do.
this whole work-life balance thing, none of us controls our lives, and none of us controls life events, obviously. So you got pandemics, you got personal tragedies.
Mm.
Sometimes we just want the world to stop spinning so we can handle our personal life, but it just never does, right? So
Mm.
also you got the increased pressures now on everyone because of economic factors. So we're seeing a rise in, use the term quiet quitting. In my opinion, at least corporate leaders are sort of reframing what used to be considered meeting objectives, which was, okay, you do all right. You wouldn't get a massive raise, but you're okay. Now that's somehow cheating the company out of employees' full effort. Well, listen, in a lot of cases, employees just don't have any more to give. But, with all that as the foundation for today's discussion, I want to open. So there's the format, by the way, there's 3 questions. Every time we do this, I should be on this camera. There's 3 questions. So the first of those 3 questions is, what are your thoughts on terms like, work-life balance and quiet quitting? How do you land there?
So, and it's saying with diversity as well, we don't have to talk about diversity, but I feel like these are like words that are purposely designed to guide people. If you give it a label, we start working on them. And unfortunately, they exist because we need to like kind of work on them, right? So work-life balance is simply to me truly just balance. What I mean by that is that a workplace, like I run help run a workplace as a CEO, but I also have a personal life, right? And when I think about this work-life perspective, I feel like it's like if you just had balance, we wouldn't really have the work life as the term. And it's a tough one because the expectation you have from a job to say, well, you're supposed to support it, but I mean, they can't fix your life, right? You know what I mean? Meaning, and so where I start with it is like, at least from the CEO perspective, I wake up and I have to look at it as my personal responsibility to keep myself balanced because I've got 65 plus people expecting a check in every 2 weeks and a certain, dependency upon the leadership in the company, right? And so I wake up and when I think about work-life balance, I just think about my balance. But for me, it's like, did I wake up and go to the gym? Did I meditate? Did I check in with my feelings and like myself and like how I'm doing? What's the mood I'm in? Because that's going to matter during the day. Just different perspectives. I also do grateful exercises and things like this, just because it kind of keeps you in a good mindset. I'm big on a proponent of personal mental health. I have therapy. I've been doing therapy for 10 years. I'm not going to lie about it, and I'm very proud of it. And I also recognize that I'm a bit, I'm in a lucky position to have this room. So I want to speak to that as like with that caveat that I'm aware that this is not a one fit for all. But the work-life balance, I think when you combine that now with this quiet quitting concept, it's kind of like, I feel like I've watched like during COVID, what's really happened, at least in my opinion, from observing is, we all had this existential crisis, no matter how we acted, mask, no mask, let's just remove that because it's just all noise. Any utopian existential crisis is going to make us act like that. So that's in the past, no matter what we did. We were scared. We were
Everyone was,
frightened that
absolutely.
we could literally die. This could have been the plague, right? Like we don't have control of that. And that was it was like a collective trauma that we all went through and are still kind of like, it's going to probably take about 10 years to even like heal from it and stuff. It had changed our lives, right? And it stopped us and went, am I living the life I want to be living? Thus,
What a good
quiet
point.
quitting comes around, right? I don't like the term quiet quitting because I'm against passive aggression. And I really do believe that like your voice is your number one asset. And so I think it could be kind of something, especially the way media might portray it, right? Is that it could be encouraged where I just think ethically, if I hate my job, I'm going to still do 100% for that day. And I'm going to try to communicate the best I could. And then obviously, if things go south and they just don't hear me, I just go find another job somewhere and I wait and but I will do my job 100% because they're paying me. They're not changing their decision on how much they're paying me. So I believe in just at least doing that. The quiet quitting part kind of confuses me because I'm just like, nobody wins. You quietly go to another job, don't speak up to in that next job. That job doesn't understand you and what your needs are. So then it just keeps repeating. And that job never gets to improve either because they don't know they're doing something that is not working with you and maybe a few people.
Right, but I got a piece on
you
that
know,
one. So I think you're right. But also like this quiet quitting, like this whole concept, everything I've read about it is essentially people aren't performing to the level some companies, some organizations, some leadership want them to, right? It's the whole, you're not an A player, you're not a superstar. I need you to work extra hours, I need you to stay late, I need you to do this and that. And if you're not, then suddenly you're just not, well, you're quitting, you're here and you're working, we're paying you, but you're not really giving us everything you've got. I mean, they're sort of reframing this idea that, like I said, what used to be considered just meets objectives, right? It used to be you had like you were a superstar, or you just met objectives, or you didn't meet objectives, a PIP or whatever, right? And meets objectives was, like the C player, right? A B, C, whatever. Yeah, you're good enough. Like we gave you goals, you hit the goals, you didn't exceed them, you're not special, you're probably not getting promoted, but you're here. Which I will say, frankly, you need some of those people on the team. If everybody thinks they're a superstar, everybody's fighting for advancement. It's a cutthroat world. I'm thrilled to have some people that are really good at what they do. They give you, like I said, they give you everything they got. But listen, they do their hours and they're out, whatever it is, they're 40 or whatever it comes out to be. And they, they're working to live, not living to work. But I think we're seeing more of a push with this quiet quitting term of saying, no, that's not good enough. Like if you only did 40 hours here and then you went surfing for the weekend, well, I mean, that's time that could have been spent with us. Or, if you are a DJ at night, well, you obviously have more time and energy. You should be putting more of that into us. You're on salary. It's not like it's an hourly job, but there's this push to like get more and more out of people, right? Which totally, it goes against the whole work-life balance concept, right? We want you to have balance, but not on our time. And now we think all of your time is our time because you're on salary somehow, which I'm having a really hard time with. And so that's where I'm seeing it. I don't think we're talking as much about somebody who just is happy and they quietly leave. Like,
gotcha. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so the good news about that is on both sides. I guess I just don't like the term. You know what I mean?
I hate the term. Yeah, I'm with you. I hate the term. It's bad. It's marketing.
So the challenge that I see here, and I guess I'm not exposed to that because I'm running 221B, and we don't allow you to work 40 hours unless it's actually agreed upon by the team and there was a plan for it and everything like that. We're a little draconian about like making sure that you rest over. For instance, if you did end up working like Friday, we had something that came up and we needed to get a report, and most of us were up till 2. This week, these people should be taking a day off, right? Yeah. And that's kind of where it's at, right?
Well, that's because that's your commitment to balance. You believe in it internally, right. Obviously you just spoke about it, right?
And my version is obviously I want to do something different, and so it's obviously not the norm right now, right? I hope someday it will be modeled as a norm, because I will tell you, I get so much more out of people, not driving them to their deaths, but actually I'm result oriented, so I don't really care about how many hours you spend. I care about the result. Sometimes it means that we might have to do a Friday till 2 a.m. because something happens, right? And we all agreed on that, right? And that's it. But then, we always try to look at okay, this person's about to burn out if they keep going that route. So let's give them cover fire and get them to rest and death, especially IR. As you know, IR can
such a grind.
Incident response can be tough, right? And it can be like that. That's why people pay a lot more for it, because you're asking people to sacrifice their brains on a weekend, right?
It's firefighting. It's firefighting,
right?
Job,
and sometimes that happens, right? And so the challenge I have is I don't think there's a salary in the world that could justify someone to keep going. I want more and more and more and more and more from you. I mean, what did they talk about? The idea of even less than 40-hour weeks was a discussion during COVID as well. And again, I haven't tried those out. I have had the half-day Fridays in the previous job, and they seem to be pretty awesome. And then I even read a study that if you're over 40, it's actually better for anybody above 40 to work 3 days, because it's more of a focused. As you get older, your style, you have to work more smart. You don't have to work as hard, right? It's it's different. And our world doesn't require sprinters. Our world requires brain. Yeah. Right. So this isn't
we're not in a factory. No offense to anybody there, but we're not cranking things out. This isn't always a numbers game. I mean, I think you nailed it. It's output is what matters, right? And a lot of what we do in this industry is, deep thought, is analysis, is problem solving, is where you need a sharp brain. Yeah, and it requires a
marathon pace, not
exactly
ironically in engineering called them sprints, but it's still a marathon pace. The engineers know when to stop that day, whether it's engineers or IR, and again, but the idea is that you should build in this balance that respects it, because I'm going to tell you, if there comes a day where you've got a company like that's pushing and pushing and pushing, even if they pay more, someone will go to a place like our place that, we pay pretty well, but just say it was big company to small company and go, we can give you this. They're going to take that over the fact that they feel they belong and are heard and understood and get their weekends and everything like that. So when I, for instance, do a contract for me as an executive, and this is I coach a lot of executives, like behind the scenes during COVID, especially, just as a free part of my time. But like I would say, hey, you know what, when you go in your new job, you can put in your contract what your boundaries are, right? You actually can do that. I do that at every job I have. By the way, Saturday and Sunday are religious. I'm Jewish on Saturday and I'm Christian Sunday. You know what? Last company didn't bother me at all. I'm neither of these.
Right.
But the point being is that like the minute I put that out there, it's none of their business. But I added religion, and guess what? 5 years last job, never got a call on the weekend.
Yep.
Right.
Well, I think that's a really good point. And that's a good point about being able to set boundaries. And again, you and I both agree there's privilege to some of the discussion. We know that, right? This isn't for everybody.
Yeah, I want to be very clear that obviously 100%. This is tech. This is this. But if you're in tech, this advice will likely fly in most cases, unless you're kind of starting out, but boundaries still count. So
totally. But the key thing here is, I mean, to me at least, you mentioned like you're a leader. You founded a company. You have people that look to you to leadership, and I think it's about having a leader who sets the example and the stage and the expectation. These aren't catchphrases. You live this, you believe this. Hey, I'm like you in that, I've led Intel teams, and sometimes like, man, I need you to come in. I need you to work Saturday, and you're going to work all night. You might even work all day Sunday. It might be all, but I've literally told people, do not come in on I will have your computer deactivated for a couple of days if I have to. I've done that to folks. You can ask. There's people on my team my old team that'll chuckle now, because I've said if I keep seeing you on Slack, I'm going to tell IT to shut you off for a couple of days. You need the time off. Yep. And I think it's that whole thing is quality over quantity and output, right? If people burn themselves out, especially in these high intense thinking jobs, they're going to make more mistakes. They're going to do lousier work. They're going to call in more things. It's going to get lazier and slower and softer and weaker, because they're just worn out. Whereas if you give them just a couple days off, what they come back and do could be amazing and done quickly. Now, I'm somebody who is a bit of a procrastinator, and I'm a burst worker. And you give me a project with a 2-week deadline, I'm not the guy you want to ask for updates 4 days in. The chances are I haven't even looked at the project yet, because I've still got 10 days and I got 7 other projects I'm working on. But it'll all get there, right? And I find the time for balance. And for me, that was one of the things with COVID. And it's been interesting to see. And I think now we're seeing, the push to put me back in the offices. And some people have dealt with this differently, right? Listen, I find time every day. I work, I don't know how many hours a week I work. I'm not going to lie. And somebody can go check my computer now and find out, I'm sure. And I hope they don't. But, if you go through and look at all the patterns, you might find, oh, geez, on Tuesday, this guy for 4 hours just disappeared. Yeah, I did. You know what? I didn't have anything urgent that day. I probably needed a mental break. So I took the dog for a walk, or
I took a mental break all day yesterday. I literally did, because we had a situation that I won't go into that, like I said, that Friday document, all this stuff. Yesterday was my day off. It was like, I didn't really get a full weekend. I want my 2 days. And so we moved, a couple people literally took off, including me, and we rotate, and that's what happened. So and I was it. I was like, I am going to be lazy today. I don't care.
That's right.
I'm literally going to act like it's Saturday or Sunday. So
and it'll work. But of course, it takes, first of all, it takes leadership that believes in this, and it takes trust. Trust in your ability, first of all, to hire people. I think the biggest challenge I see is folks, there isn't enough trust necessarily in the workforces. And a lot of times, listen, some people have earned distrust. That happens. But I think a lot of times it's that people don't trust their own hiring processes. Like I've always said to somebody, if you're micromanaging people, it's a reflection on you in so many ways. One of them is, why did you hire them if you don't trust them? Well, we hired them, and whatever. Well, it's on you then. Like, do your research.
One of our core values, trust begets trust, is how we try to start.
Exactly.
Because, like, look, it's like no different than if I'm in a relationship, right? Obviously, I have a wife or whatever. But the reality is that I can't walk into that relationship and expect to be successful if I don't trust her at the start. The number one reason people cheat on each other is because they actually think they're cheating on the other. That insecurity literally,
they think it's already happening to them. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and so then they go screw it, right?
And they go make a bad choice, and they find out they did it first. Take this back
to an analogy back into work environments, the same thing.
Yep.
If you think, there was a call I got, it's probably a year and a half ago, but like someone's like, oh, they've got the keys to our admin. We need to figure out this and that. And oh my gosh. And like, they just hit me up. I said, why don't you just give them a severance package 3 months and get the keys from them?
And they'll go away.
They will go away and be happy because they have 3 months to get a job, and they will happily. I said, you guys are like overthinking, ready to go on the attack. I said, trust begets trust. This is why people act that way, because you're assuming they will, like I obviously not perfect.
Sure.
We've had some crazy once in a while, but but outside of that, the majority, you got to remember that it's like that 80-20 thing. You're 80%. If you start trusting everybody, 80% of that time, you're going to like have a good time.
Yep. I totally agree. And I've had those conversations. It's funny you mentioned that. I've had conversations. I've seen companies go on the path of, possible legal, et cetera. And I'm like, why don't you just give them a better severance package? Like, find out what the root cause is. And again, it doesn't work for everybody in every situation, but a lot of times the root cause is your issue with that. And it's much easier than all the stress and the frustration and the cost of the other path that you're heading down. I'm not a CEO, so there's a lot of factors in those discussions that I'm not involved in. There's a lot of things I don't understand, I'm sure, but I've been around forever. Now I'm old, and I've seen enough to think that, taking good care of people, I think mostly it works. I've been chastised before. I've been known for being too trusting. I've had issues where people are like, well, you got bit because you did this thing. And I still generally act the same way. When I came into my last new team, I said right away, I'm going to trust all of you with my life, essentially. Like, you own my career, not the other way around. I don't have time to try to figure out if I should or shouldn't trust people. You're all experts. You have great resumes. You were hired for good reason. You have all my trust and faith. Let's go do good things, and we'll figure it out from there. I've always told my team, whatever team I have, the three things are, if it isn't illegal, it isn't immoral, unethical, it isn't against a written company policy, and written is a really important word in that sentence, go do it. Don't ask my permission. Go do it. I trust you, and I own all the risk and the responsibility for it. If it's outside those boundaries, you're on your own. I'm not going to jail for you, but everything else is on me. And just go do things. And I've also found, like you said, trust begets trust. Oftentimes, obviously, when a new leader comes in, people are nervous. Who's this person? What are they going to be like, et cetera? And I have those conversations, and I've had to actually reiterate them a couple of times because people don't believe you at first, or because I'm notorious. I talk a lot. I tell people I know that. I said, so statistically, I'm going to say more stupid things. And if I do, it's just how it works. If I'm in a meeting and if I hurt your feelings or I offended you in any way, please
let
don't
me know.
Wait. That's right.
Just
and don't wait. Call me out in front of the group. You have my permission. There are no repercussions.
People don't usually believe that, but then they get all shocked when it actually happens.
That's right.
And holy cow, I remember this in my last job. And the guy was like, hey, you remember when you said it? I said, yep. And I'm holding to it. Yep. And the dude was relieved on the one-on-one because he's like, holy crap. Like, I'm like, yeah, like I know it's hard to believe because everybody wants to say that. Mm-hmm. But I literally wake up going, if I'm doing a performance for you, I'm like, skip what I'm good at. I'm aware of it. Tell me what I need to work on. I am always looking forward to the areas that I can improve. And so when you have that kind of perspective, and which a lot of people in cybersecurity, I think, do, like, minus the ego, right? The trick is you got to get that ego, like, to be an advisor, but not necessarily in your way, right? And that takes growth and time and blah, blah, blah. We all have it. We all went through it. But essentially, it's really just always being a beginner, always trying to learn, like, as a leader, I'm not going to solve this problem. I'm not going to solve people don't understand why leadership actually probably pays very well, but it's the mental mindfulness and exercise in the head you have to do. You got to control your emotions, but yet also lend them when they're necessary, or like you have to see it in the right thing. It's a challenge, right? But honestly, if you, like, we go back to you working on your own personal responsibility, your own things, your balance, when you do that, what will happen is you'll actually, if you are balanced, you're in the moment. So you will make the right decisions in most cases. And when you don't, you quickly say, well, that was a bad call. Let me, blah, or apologize or whatever it takes. But you'll be able to, like, kind of pretty much flow more than you would not, because you got to just have faith in that the floor is going to still hold while you're walking around. And then also that the people are going to do their thing. And I like that you said, if it isn't illegal, this and that, because in the long run, the number one thing humans want in this world, work or outside of work, is to be understood. And the more we actually do that and try to understand every single person as we can, the best we can in the moment, if we're listening to them, if they feel listened, all this stuff, the power you get out of, like, them enjoying their work, getting in the flow, not having the imposter syndrome for at least a little bit. Not everybody, obviously, everybody's got their different stages, but you definitely up the statistical percentage that they're going to find themselves and figure out that flow for themselves, right?
Yeah, I agree. I mean,
providing that runway, So,
I mean, it takes guts. You got to be a bit of a risk taker in this form of leadership, right? So, and I have been burned. I've trusted the wrong people, and it happens sometimes. But I've also said I'm still going to keep doing this because overall, like, the net's positive.
It's the net. It's always positive.
The teams I've worked with, like, I get out of their way. They do amazing things. Yeah, the first time ever, I tell people to call me out. I know something had happened and somebody told me about it afterwards. I was like, oh my God, I had no idea I had that impact. But they didn't call me out in front of the group. So I sent an email. Now, I did not call them out. I wasn't going to turn it around, but I said it come to my attention, that I said something, thoughtlessly. And so I gave it, a full mea culpa. And somebody followed back like, I can't believe you did that. I said, I told you I would. Like, if you don't call me out in front of the group, I'll call me out in front of the group, because it's not right that I should offend somebody in front of a group and then privately you get an apology. And I didn't know, and I want to fix it. So, I wanted to get on that. That's about personal integrity and responsibility. So everybody's held accountable. That includes me. And, let's move on. And once you do that a couple times, people are like, oh, I get it. And then, of course, then somebody calls me an asshole in a meeting. And I'm like, aha, you get it. That's what I said. I was being an asshole. Thank you. Exactly. Thank you. You were right. I didn't realize what I said. Absolutely. You deserve an apology for that. That is not what I meant to say. And yes, I was being an asshole. Let's move on from that. And people go, all right, cool. I can call the boss an asshole. I'm like, well, don't do it all the time, please. But, if I've earned it, I've earned it.
Yeah. Allison, of course.
Yeah, man. Allison Nix.
You want to tell later. But like Allison's one of the things is that we have sometimes I'll be a hard head, right? For a half a second, or like sometimes it might even take up to 30 minutes. And Allison's trying to tell me, because I might have a previous experience. It's blocking me from listening. But she's like, the one thing I always appreciate, Lance, is you try to, like, at the end of it, you do listen. And there was a thing we were getting to in a debate, and I at first was pushed off. And it's because my previous job, I was kind of defensive of the engineering team. It was an automatic mode.
Yep.
And then when I thought about it, I was like, oh, you know what? You're actually right. And then I went to the engineering team. So, by the way, in that other meeting, Allison, I know I kind of shut you down. Like, I was coming from a perspective of being defensive for the engineering team, but you actually have a really good point here. And I just called it out in our engineering, like, Slack or whatever. And I get a comment like from one of our engineers, like, I've never seen a boss that does actually owns that right there. And I said, well, that's how we learn accountability across the thing. If I'm doing that, hopefully you guys will do the same, and you won't be so afraid of like all the conflicts and the lack of you'll go
100%.
Right.
Yeah,
and
100%.
you got to be the example. You got to be the example. And that's
100%.
just the way it is.
And that all goes
if I don't
where
like
we
it,
were.
if I want to swallow it internally, it doesn't matter, because my leader hat's on, and that's more important for the people I serve every single day than it is my ego or how I might feel about it.
Yeah. And I mean, and it closes out that whole first topic we were just having, which is, you want people not to quiet quit. You want people to be committed and involved. Well, if they think you care about them, true work-life balance, you care about them being healthy and safe, you care about their opinions, you are hold yourself as accountable as you would hold them.
More than
they feel like they're in that environment.
They know that.
They know. That's right. Then they'll give you what they have. Now, it doesn't mean somebody has to give you 80 hours a week. That's still ridiculous.
Actually, I think
they'll give you what
so much with 40.
100%. 100%. Let's dig into the tough stuff, right? This is kind of the big one. So, as you know, and probably everybody listening does at this point, I've been working my way through grief. I had a girlfriend suddenly die earlier this year. I mean, it was unexpected, right? I left town to go speak. She was fine. By the time I came back, she was very much not fine. And within 24 hours, she was gone. And so I wasn't prepared for any of that, frankly. I mean, who is? And I had to immediately manage a whole lot of things that are massively impactful. And that, like I said, I wasn't prepared for. All the arrangements have to be made, right? There wasn't a will involved. There's family to work through. There's in this case, geography was part of the issue. So lots of things, right? And so, like a lot of us, who are problem solvers, whether you're Intel, whether you're IR, whatever, you put on the operational hat. Okay, I'm going to start handling these things, the logistics, and you start checking boxes. This has to happen, and this has to happen, and this has to, and you start knocking out a whole bunch of things, right? And I hadn't really connected with the loss, to be honest. I thought I had, okay, but
you and I behind the scenes talked about that a little bit.
100%, right? So Emily dies on a Saturday, right? I'm out of town. I come back Thursday, and Friday she ends up in the hospital, and Saturday she's gone. Yeah. I actually thought I was going to go to work on Monday. Like, I did all logistics, everything over the weekend, and like I showed up Monday morning on my computer. And by the way, I hadn't told anybody at work what happened even. Monday morning, I get on my first meeting. It lasted like 5 minutes, and it just all hit. And I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. So we're not doing this meeting. So, and then, that starts a path, right? Now, before I go too far down my own path, to make sure this is a conversation instead of me just chatting alone about my life, I know you've had to manage tragedy too. And obviously we've talked about this offline. It was, your situation, and, I appreciate your guidance and your help as well for mine. So let's clue the audience in on where we both are, and we can talk through this. Okay. So, if you're okay with it, can you talk a little bit about what happened, how you worked through it, while still having a career in security?
Sure. So in 2018, my son passed away in a drowning accident. Mine's a very complicated situation because I also wasn't allowed to see my children for, at that time, 8 years, and then it was like 10 total due to a very tumultuous divorce. I'm not here to diss anybody on that side of it, but it was just two sides of it in California law. And if anybody's familiar with that, it's a pain in the butt. So in that, it was a big shocker to me because my biggest fear was also them. I knew they were not having proper structured parenting, this and that, and I was fighting in the courts and all this stuff. But because of the complicated matter, and unfortunately, judges don't know you right? It just kind of gets passed through, right?
Yep.
And so, July 4th, I get a call from a friend of mine that he's passed away, and they did the best they could in 10 hours in an emergency room and blah, blah, blah. Medevac from Arizona to Vegas. All this gives us all a bullhead. So it was on the corner cusp. And it broke me. I'm going to just be straight out honest. It really just broke me in that moment. There's some noises that I've never made in my life, and they came out of me that moment.
Yep.
Right. And there's a reason I also didn't say sorry about Emily, because we've already talked about it too. Have you ever noticed that everybody saying sorry gets kind of weird?
Yeah, it is a weird thing, and I've had, I've had some of this. My mother died when I was 12, and we can go through all sorts of stories. So I remember then, like, I know people mean well, right? And you always,
but it's just like, there's no words.
Thank you. There are no words, right? Sorry is just the only one we have available. But no, you and I have talked. Listen, everybody at this point, like, the sorries, I'm good at that, and we can go through my journey. But no, you and I have clearly talked. I mean, I just as I didn't say, sorry about your son.
Yeah, exactly. So we get it, right?
But so we've been there. It's an understood thing.
That get it part, I'm going to get to get to in a later, but I want to actually point that out at some point. But what I did to get through this was I took an immediate 90-day break. I tried to do 60, come back, even try for a day, and I'm like, oh nope, I'm not there. So I did 90, and I was very lucky, because the company I was working at was very they weren't toxic. They were very considerate. They understood. They were take all the time you need. They even covered me at because I had child support and pretty hefty child support. They covered my flights over to the funeral. They really were supportive, right?
That's awesome.
And so I got really, lucky there. And I know that not everybody's situation will have that, right? But I couldn't move for a good 30 days. So I started getting, and I believe everybody needs kind of a box after a tragedy. Tragedies will kick your butt, right? It'll just shift you
so much.
And some people's religion, Christianity, Judaism, whatever it is, Islam, blah, blah, blah. Mine was Buddhism, right? And the reason why mine was Buddhism is because it's a book that says be good, but it actually has instructions.
We could use some of those, and they're useful ones, as I understand. Like, you can actually do things with them.
Yeah. And so Zen Buddhism was I couldn't move, and I'm like, well, I've got this book sitting on my shelf called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And I'm like, I better sit and put it to work, because I can't do anything but sit. And since I'm sitting, I better why not learn meditation? And in my world at that time was also a way I could talk to my son, because we had I only saw him last time at 8, and he kind of hated me based on the narrative. So this was kind of like a closure, complicated closure piece, and so I had to just kind of I did lean hella into it. And so if I had 90 days, I decided to lean into the pain, because my entire life, I'm going to be totally honest, as an extrovert, I've always avoided my pain. So I always was out there in the world and this and that. And this is the first time it forced me to be super silent, super quiet. And I'm like, oh shoot, this is a first for Lance. So I'm like, I better welcome this weird silver lining while I'm dealing with it. Right. And I shared, of course, some of my journeys along the way too, because I've learned something about suffering later on, is that I'm like, oh, this can actually be used to relate and help someone shortcut something in their life if it happens to them. And I figured if you share it, it also was kind of cathartic for me. But I wrote music, I shared my experiences when I could. And I because I was thinking a lot, but I was finally getting to know who the heck I was. I've spent most of my life with my own long distance, if you're kept from your kids, imagine how much pain that might be.
Awful.
You know what I mean? So then this happens. This is that catalyst of everything just broke. I was even angrier at mom and blah, 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 their mom and everything, of course, all this stuff. And so then 90 days comes, right? And I got into a state of 3 days meditation, very much into my, I just went to town about having my own space. And the weird thing is, once you start experiencing your own space, you're going to fight tooth and nail to keep that. A lot of times what happens is we don't recognize until a tragedy hits us about our own space, because the world pulls on us. And then you kind of we're like, oh, I got that, so I'm going to protect my peace, right? As they say on memes and crap. So I head to work, and they actually were dealing with this is the previous job. Was dealing with a reduction in force. And when I got back, I joked and I said, what do you guys do to the company? I just leave for 90 days. Come on.
Right.
Just messing about it. But I was at a very different energy. My energy was lower. I was quiet. I could listen. It was kind of interesting. It's because I didn't really want to talk. It took a lot of energy for me to talk. It took a lot of energy for me to take a 1 step, 2 step, 3 step. I wore light clothes when I got back. I literally got like Buddha's outfits and like whatever was like, I haven't stopped wearing Chinese Kung Fu shoes since he died because literally I love like the light clothes. Like I really do. So because when you're grieving, it's like your body's filled with rocks and it's very, very heavy. Right.
Yep.
And so when I came back, they were like, we want you to take over the VP of engineering from. I was already the chief scientist, just for a record, but also kind of like, and I said, why? And they said, honestly, the way you've actually handled your grieving is with grace. And also when you were gone, and this goes back to our first subject, when you were gone, your two teams that you ran were the most successful in this company, even when you weren't here.
Nice.
And
that's a good reflection on leadership right there.
That is exactly the ultimate. And I used to have a problem with that, like insecurity wise, but when this happened, you just got to go with it. And I said, hey, team leads, take the conch. I'll be back in 90. Right. So but here's the thing. I also used grieving to my advantage. It was the first time I learned about like you could really say no to things. Right. It's like where you can learn the power of no and the boundaries, right? Where I actually had an opportunity to reset everything just like I did internally and meditation and whatever I did all there. I also had now a way to assert myself. You're not going to tell a dude that's like already have energy and like this and that. We want you to do all these crazy things. What I said is, well, you're going to do it my way if I say yes to this. Because the last 3 years of the reason why you got here, and no offense to the company, but was just repeated patterns that we got stuck in. So I said, I have a new way of doing this. I have a different set of energy and there's going to be some things that change. So I had them move all important meetings to Mondays, no Tuesday meetings, period.
Good.
That ended up becoming company-wide after a while because it's like I had a 40-person engineering team. I said, I need a coach. I don't know anything about like dealing with teams bigger than like X, right? I deputized obviously my directors and like really relied on them, things like that. But I made them have they had a break room, but I made them put a meditation mat in there and respect that I was going to meditate three times a day. And I basically started doing this thing called a Focus 4. Because I looked at the JIRA and I'm like 32 projects, 40 developers. That's why you guys are not getting what you want out. So I pretty much kick product out of stand-ups. I'm like, there's no problem. There's no problem you're solving in a stand-up. It's literally for the engineers. Right. And I got in a big, because I came out with this Focus 4 without asking.
You didn't even want them to be there to listen to the engineers, even if they weren't allowed to speak, just to hear what was there?
They already were always so busy in every meeting that they never got anything done as a product team. I went and read a book on what is the role of product and what's the role of engineering. Because I've never been a VP of engineering before. So I had no idea. So I started reading books on organized psychology, all the stuff, because it's like, the reality is I was going to have a team that some people I'm not going to be able to remember their names. I always like small teams because it could be more personal and this and that. But then I started reading these books and I realized, well, actually, one-on-ones will also reflect the entire pattern of the group. You'll see these patterns across each one-on-one that you'll hear about too. They'll all have the same pattern, right? So I started just kind of like thinking slowly, like this and that, like just kind of like, spending a couple months just listening and like really hearing. I had a STFU in my notebook because I'm also a talker, but because I was also in a different state, I had to shut the fuck up, Lance, in my notebook. And I wouldn't take my cell phone or my laptops in there, and we wouldn't allow cell phones or laptops unless you were literally on an emergency. And if that was the case, I was keeping you out of the meeting anyways. So essentially, I just reset all these rules. I made them go back to their vision and mission, stop having client codependency, step back. And I knew I could do this because I was in a grieving thing and they needed me. And also they're not going to say no. Because they know I have to operate a certain way if they want me to succeed, right?
Change the culture, basically, yeah. So I think it's interesting. So your journey, you were able to take 90 days, which again, good on you, good on the company, obviously being in that position, right? I mean, company, working for people that, and with people that are supportive is massive, right? And when you came back, you actually leveraged, some of it being perceptions, you're still a father in grief, of course, but also some of the time you'd spent to get recentered and to get more connected and to,
I got time to study.
Exactly. And leverage that into a change. So conversely, and sort of the discussion here about, I think both of us would probably agree there's no right or wrong answer necessarily, but people do things differently, right? And so I'm obviously earlier in my journey. I mean, this is years from now. And so you have a bigger perspective, right? And I'm, pretty early, everything for me happened just in March and it's September now. So, but at the same time, while going back Monday was clearly foolish and wasn't going to happen, I was only gone a couple of weeks. To be clear, like you, one thing we have in common, my company was great. I couldn't be more thankful. It had nothing to do with bereavement policy, which, most companies have like 3 days.
I think you need to stay busy. I know how you are, man.
But 3 days is not enough for anybody, of course.
No.
So, but the company was fantastic. I was overwhelmed with support. In my case, I mentioned, I went to that meeting Monday morning. I was like, oh, this is, then it all hit me. And I had not, so I got out the meeting. I didn't even tell anybody in the company. My first thought, which is odd, but I got on LinkedIn actually and wrote. And I know you saw this, and I'm sure others did too.
That's why I reached out. I was like, I didn't even
exactly.
know about this. I was like,
yeah.
whoa.
So it wasn't planned. It wasn't contrived or anything, but it just, I was feeling something. I not only wanted to share what was going on with me, but I wanted to share what I thought was immediately a learning experience for others. I'd been out of town when all this started, and consistently for our entire relationship, my entire career, which had a lot of travel in it, Em insisted on us talking every night, and she wanted to check on me and make sure I was okay, really. And I was like, I'm always okay, don't worry about it. And it didn't really occur to me, are you okay? Like, you just assume home is home, like everybody's gonna be fine, right? And so I took a moment, I started kind of writing some of that out, and I had I mentioned obviously what had happened, etc. The next thing, somebody from work pings me and is like, all the services start and everything, because I hadn't even bothered to tell work yet that this had happened. So of course, then I said, yes, I slacked my boss. So after the LinkedIn note, the next thing was slacking my boss. I said, listen, I'm not working today, and I don't know when I'm working. This has just happened. And I shared the LinkedIn post internal, like with him. I was like, I can't write it twice. Here's what happened. And so I was just sharing that. Here's the message. Here's what's going on. And I was very lucky. The company was great. Obviously, the outpouring of support from people who, in the network, et cetera, was fantastic and really overwhelming. People were just unbelievable in their love and support. And then, so for me, it was like, okay, now what am I going to do? Because I don't know how long I'm going to be away or what I'm going to do. And yeah, I wasn't gone very long. I was scheduled to do some speaking events. And, the company's like, listen, we can pull you out of these. And I said, please don't. Like, I need to go do these things. Again, COVID, we're already segregated. I work at home and, nowhere near anybody else. So I was like, being alone, I can only do so much of that. I had a few days. I cried an absolute ton, but you can only cry with the dog next to you for so long. And you're like, all right, I got to get out. I got to
Everybody processes it differently. And that's the thing, that my version of it is, it shouldn't be your version of it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so I remember my next thing was to go to Toronto. So, this happened. I was actually in Denver for speaking for FS-ISAC in Denver when all this unfolded. My next event was in Toronto, also for FS-ISAC. So it was a lot of the same people who now knew what had happened in between, right? And but I said, listen, this is where my home is. This is where my comfort level is. This is my support system. And frankly, Em was a big supporter of me doing these things. And it also still a way to honor her as I was going forward. And so yeah, I was only gone. I don't know if it was 3 weeks total. I doubt it was probably a couple weeks. And I have been busy. But for anybody listening and wondering, including you, I'm not disconnected from what's going on. I'm still processing it and managing it. And, like you said,
5 years for me, and I'm still processing.
Yeah,
I'm just starting to get outside and do stuff. That's why I was like telling you, I just started Aikido.
Yep.
I'm trying to get out. Like, it can take a long time, and it's like waves,
Totally. And part of the reason I got this gym membership, I mean, obviously I could stand to be in better shape, but the truth is part of the reason I got it is because they do yoga and meditation. And I'm looking for outlets as well, but I'm also finding myself already with some learnings out of this, again, connecting with yourself, like you said, what really matters, what's really important. When something shocking like that happens, you're able to go, all right, all this is fleeting. We all know that and we talk about it, but it hits you again. You're like, yeah, all this really is fleeting. What really matters? And starting to lean in on the things that do matter, right? Like you did, coming back and saying, listen, it's going to be on my terms. Now, of course, the flip side is because of the way I like to work, and I'm always known for it, I'm actually still doing the opposite. I say yes to everything. I haven't gotten quite to the power and no piece. I got to work on that. I say yes to everything and let future AJ figure it out. And that poor son of a bitch has a tough life usually. And he hates past AJ.
It's all about how people cope, right? Like, it's like, and Carl Jung said it best, that when a big tragedy happens, so ego death tends to occur. It doesn't mean your ego is gone. It ripped my entire world apart. And I'm going to be totally honest. People won't recognize this because obviously, me at conferences, it's a little different, right? But I became a better husband over it. I became a better father over it. I became better to myself. And it took a couple of years to really kind of lay out that groundwork. And fellowship is also a big key. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
that's another one.
Yeah.
So,
No, and I agree. And and that was one of the things I was really thankful for. Again, so many people were so kind and reached out. And one thing I learned out of all that, and it's funny you mentioned we started the opening, like people say, I'm sorry, etc. And I've thanked folks in mass and individually when I can. But I've said,
how do you scale that? Come on.
Oh, it's hard. But I've said to people, listen, if you don't think what you say matters, I learned how much it does. I do the same thing everybody does. Something happens, you're like, I'm really sorry if there's anything I can do to help. And or I'm really sorry, to hear about this. I'm thinking about you, whatever it might be. those actually do have cumulative effect. Listen, some of them you realize, like, is there anything I can do to help? I'm like, come on, we've met one time. You live in, Kansas. You're probably not gonna be able to do much for me. But I appreciate.
Well, the good thing about our
cybersecurity,
cybersecurity community, we are and intelligence, but like we're
Yeah.
all very like
We all
overly
know
helpful.
somebody.
If anything, we don't always know our own limits with that, but
Totally. So, but I realized there's a cumulative effect to that. I never really felt alone, even though I mean, aside from the dog, I really was for a big stretch there. But I wasn't. Every day between Slack and email, which I still check, between my phone and Signal and LinkedIn and I mean, there were messages everywhere. There wasn't a day that many people didn't remind me. That
for me, it got a little
things were good.
overwhelming for a second because it was all coming in like this, and I had people calling me, wanted to talk. Like
I didn't take phone calls.
I have a few people to thank that literally called because they've also had it happen to them, and they were calling saying, "Welcome to the losing a child club," and blah blah blah. And they kind of like walked me through stuff because when someone actually has gone through it, you can relate a little bit, and you kind of go, "Don't feel so like, what do I do?" Because there's no map for this crap, right? You know what I mean? So.
No, 100%. No, I think that was huge. So listen, we got to move on to the third question here. Give me your 3 biggest takeaways from managing tragedy and grief, and how they affect you personally and professionally. Like, what were the 3 things that you either learned from, or you grew the most from, or you're the most thankful for through that process?
Okay. So like 1, I can listen to my wife now in a way that I've always wanted to. What I mean by that is that I'm a talker. I have like my ego used to be in the way and defend and debate and all that stuff. Like, you're a younger version of yourself. You don't always know that you're there. But when you get woken up and you get that ego death and it kicks your ass and all this stuff, and I'm not saying my ego's gone, but what I'm saying is it really definitely dampened down the insecurities, right? My brain, like it's kind of a thing where it's like, you can't even hurt me anymore. I have had the worst thing happen to me.
Yep. I got
so
you.
Why am I stuck on like extra thoughts? I'm not, right? And I believe meditation obviously trained my brain to like, I used to have 50,000 thoughts at the same time. And now it's kind of like, it's nice and sequential, right? So it's calmed me down. Like I can choose to have my energy. I can now be accountable. I can be relied upon. Before my earlier versions of me, I could not. I could write off my laurels and all my talents. That's its own thing, but it didn't teach me anything. Right. And now, like when I do it, like because of this, like whatever I went through kind of thing, I finally became the man that I like, where it's like my idealistic version of me became my realistic version of me. And I've been waiting for that for a long time. I've had the wisdom to understand that I want to be that way, but I could never get it. Right. I'm talking about where you're just growing. Right. And it also hit around my 40s. So there might be I personally do think men really become men when they're like hit their 40s, if you know what I mean? It all kind of compounded in one place. And one of the things I learned is that I practice and learned how to listen now. And I am literally at the place I'm being. Second thing, I let go. So a thing, and this only works for me. I'm not sure if it works for everybody, but I think there's like a secret to life. Everybody has a jihad. And what I mean by that is the real term in Arabic means struggle. We're on a narrative. There's something we're holding on to. There's a trauma. There's this. There's that. Mine was the kids, the 10 years, this and that. And I was building up anger because of this. I didn't understand it. So, of course, I'm angry. During COVID, when this existential crisis started hitting, and then I noticed that I could actually hear my wife like completely. I mean, COVID actually was great for us. And what I mean that it's not like I don't purposely not listen to my wife, but I was calm and I can actually hear. Listening
this
to
resonates
understand.
with me. I get this absolutely,
and it was new to me. I'm like, oh my god, that's awesome, right? I just had that moment where like, what the hell, right?
Well, the thing about the pandemic, just to interject quickly, is we saw lots of stories of relationships that completely fell apart, etc. But what I'd said to folks is, to me, the pandemic would amplify whatever you had, right? To be honest, ironically, it was some of the best years of the relationship I had with Em as well. But if you were unhealthy, it was just going to amplify it, and it was all probably going to blow up. And if you were healthier, like we leaned more into the healthier parts of who we were. We spent more time together, and we had to, obviously, and we worked through a lot. But it's funny, I felt like you did. I started to become a better person, and in her passing and in my process, and I'm not there yet, of course, but as I'm going, I resonate. Like what you said totally resonates with me about becoming the person you want to be. I already feel. And I see it in my actions and in my words. I'm a better version of me now, which the irony of that is that's great. And I also feel some guilt. I actually was just having a conversation the other day. I said, I owed Em more than I realized. And I didn't, there were things now I'm like, oh, I was wrong about some stuff that I never got the chance to tell where I was wrong because I didn't realize it. But now it's somewhere in here. I got a little more clarity and a little more focus and a
Best
little more
way to show
humility,
her
probably.
love. The best way to show her love is to keep taking care of you.
Well, and
That is the best way to do it.
that's exactly where I've landed on this too. I've had discussions and said, listen, we talked a little, everybody at some point in your couple talks about, what happens if I die? What are you going to do? We all go through a little bit of that, right? And she had some health issues. So we had some discussions on the subject, just not the real logistics of it.
Yeah.
And I landed right where you are.
Reality
I
of
said,
thinking
listen,
it is actually real is like, what?
Totally.
Yeah.
But I landed where you are. I'm like, listen, this is not somebody who would want me to just pine away and be miserable. We loved each other and would want the other person to go on and be a healthier, happier, better person, right? And that's, I'm with you. Part of honoring people we've lost is to be better and to do the things that we were going to do, right? So I've gotten, and that's hard because you feel some guilt and some, there's a lot of pieces in that, of course, but I've also had some reflection, like, God, I could have been better. I'm better now already than I was then. And it's unfortunate, she's been cheated out of that. She's been cheated out of a lot of things that had nothing to do with me, of course, and there's a lot there. But yeah, what you said resonates, right? I'm already like, I feel like I'm a better person now than I was 6 months ago, which is an interesting side effect to some of this. I do find myself listening more. The podcast probably is going to be the best way to prove that. But I do find myself listening to people more. I do find myself with more empathy, which I was already on a path and working on, I thought, and trying to remind myself of what's really important, which again, I'd been on that path. I've been through tragedy before. I've been through death before. I lost both my parents.
It's a little bit more like right in the.
It is. It's
different when it's different when it's a child. Like when you're a child and it happens, it etches itself totally different than it does as an adult. An adult, we actually have an opportunity to like go, And as a child, it's not really our fault. We can't really know what to expect our brains to do with that. And so it usually actually engineers some trauma reactions as an adult.
Yep.
As an adult, though, it's kind of that thing where the rule is like, look, if you were poor as a child, that's one thing. But if you're poor as an adult, what I mean in spirit, what I mean?
I got you.
Like you got to change those. You got to you have an opportunity as an adult to work on it, right?
Yeah, there's more maturity and then more responsibility that goes along with it, right?
Obviously, with caveats,
interesting.
A lot of different limits.
Sure. I mean, there's no
but in our cases, if we have the opportunity to, we should, right? Okay, so I'm going to go back to the second one was also letting go of this struggle that I actually during COVID let go. And I was reading a Buddhist passage that just says love dispels hate, hate never dispels hate, right? And it's easier read than done.
Sure.
And I was realizing like we all could die, and I had to go through this acceptance in my own meditation that I may never see my daughter, who was left in this lifetime. Right, I could die. Right, I could. This was pre-vaccines. This was all this other stuff, and I know everybody has different opinions about. But for me, like this was where I was at in my state, and I'm like, oh my God, I could step outside and it could cost my life. Right, and we're all thinking that. And so I meditated on this, and at the time, Mom was also suing the people he was with, the homeowners association, just
right, for
whatever.
Sure.
And it requires 2 people in California to sign off. I said, fine, whatever. I just didn't want to talk to her at that time. I was definitely raw. But then they won. It was like 100,000, 30, basically against like after legal fees, but like also the lawyer gets a piece of whatever. I immediately like meditated on it, and I just like did this thing where I said, give her my half. I just want a receipt for child support. And I literally moved on and let go. Like I didn't argue. I wasn't angry. I wasn't anything. I don't even care what she did with it. Right. I just was like, I let go and accepted this. A month later, she comes around and my daughter's in my life. So what I'm saying is I learned that letting go might be a little bit of a secret. I know it's easier said than done, easier read than done, but I also practiced an act of compassion with that letting go. And it actually kind of like enforced the letting go, but I literally just let it all go. And I just like, I have a deal with my daughter now. I'm not going to talk bad about your mom. Like, I'm not getting into that stuff. Right. We're just going to have our relationship. And that's the second one. And then the third one is that there's a beauty in suffering when you're still in the early ages, but there's going to be this beauty. I end up getting like the universe or however you want to put it, but puts me in front of people I can help. And some of them have been during COVID and afterwards, fathers who have lost their children, like, or about to lose their children because maybe they have like a stage 4 or this or that.
Yep.
And I have literally made it a duty to share and stick with it with them. So if they're not alone, because I'm telling you, it can take you to a dark place. I was definitely in a dark early spot in there. And, I'm really blessed that I came out of it. Honestly, my wife is a big champion here, but like, God bless her on that, if you know what I mean. So
absolutely, I'm with you.
Right. So essentially I I had a friend who's Chris. He was one of our employees, but also a good friend of mine. He was at our wedding, and he passed away, or like tragically and suddenly at 32. It was his own son. We went, of course, to the funeral. Allison and I went to the funeral, Jaleesa as well. Blah blah blah.
Yep.
I met his dad. Like we had just paid off this dude's debt, so we could actually get him here. All this stuff, and it wasn't a kindness thing. It was more of that. It was like it's in my way because I want you to start it. You want to be fresh and And there's this long story, but essentially, his dad and I still talk every single day. And I met his dad through this. So there's this beauty, this. And then recently, I was talking to him probably about a month ago, and he's like, I'm still trying to get like the old me back. I said, stop trying to get the old you back. Embrace the new
it's
you.
Gone. Yeah,
it's gone. I said, embrace this new you. I said, I don't regret. I said, of course I want my son back, but I don't regret the person since I have survived who I am now. I am completely content and happy with who I am. And he hits me up in the morning. He goes, I haven't been able to sleep all night because of something you said. I'm like, well,
what did I do?
What did I do? I'm sorry about that.
Right.
And then he showed me the thing. He goes, I've been wrestling that for like the entire time since he's died, and it's changed my view 110%, and I feel much better. And like this is the beauty in suffering is that my suffering then will like be something someone else can go, oh shoot. You know how someone go, oh, you've never been through that. Actually, I have.
Yep.
Right. And that is something like they can, ask questions. I'm like, ask me anything like this and that.
Yeah,
like
it's like paying it forward, but it's, I mean, we're not paying forward something, a kindness in this case, but we can turn it into one. And I'm with you. Like, I know we talked a little bit about this previously.
Teach compassion. You can truly teach compassion.
Totally. And the old you is gone. Like that was something I'm thankful that I guess having been down this path before, like I already knew that going in. I was, but you still do that. Like you have that moment, you're like, God, I want to get back to what was. And then you have to sit and go, all right, well, that's over. And that's, I told people, I said, listen, that part of my life, that chapter is gone. Like it cannot be recreated. I shouldn't try to. It's unhealthy.
It'll just take you back to a pattern that will repeat.
You can't go anywhere.
You may not want. Yeah,
exactly. In a new relationship, you can't say, well, I want to compare this to the last one. These are
comparisons are the thief of joy. Anyways, they are not a good.
That's a great line.
Don't compare.
Comparisons are the thief of joy. That's a great line.
Yeah, they really are.
So
not my line, by the way. I've seen that everywhere. But
no, it's a good one though. But I mean, I think that's that's a key piece, right? Is to that acceptance, right? That's part of that's the last step in grief. Is that acceptance
and it takes time.
It takes a lot, and and I don't think it's not a bulk. Like I've accepted things.
Yep.
I don't know if I've accepted everything yet.
Once that guilt goes away that you're working out, that's when you'll have acceptance.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
So, I think that's a key one, right? And like, I have no doubt that he was up all night, and it was a big thing to say, yeah, that's it. I got to stop trying to time travel, basically. I can't go back. It's done. I've got to get to the point where I go, what are we going to do going forward? This is ended. Great things are still ahead if I allow them to be, but not if I'm continuing to look in the rearview mirror. You got to find where that's going to be, right? So those are the 3 questions, but I always have one bonus question every episode. So, the name of this show is Unspoken Security. So, with that in mind, I ask every guest, and I'm going to ask you the same thing. Tell me something you've never told anyone before, something that's unspoken.
All right. I bluffed. My first job, I bluffed my way on the resume. It said that it needed Citrix. I had no clue about using Citrix.
Love it.
And my first job at this company, which I'm not going to name, these people are still my friends to this day that owned it. So, but essentially, I totally was like, yeah, I know Citrix, and I figured it out along the way. And so I bluffed it, and I padded it a little bit just to get there. But I also ended up getting a great mentor of it. That he's like 80 something now. We still talk to this day. He's an ex-NSA from the 60s guy, right? So like some Vietnam War shit. But yeah, like in a weird way, I don't regret it. I don't necessarily say everybody should do it, but I think that, it's the whole like fake it till you become it kind of.
Yeah, fake it till you make it. Yep.
Yeah, because like honestly, it drove me during the interviews. I was just like looking up freaking Citrix left and right. So I totally played the game, but I wanted that job. And honestly, it was one of the first best jobs you could ever have. So it was kind of cool. So
yeah. So I think that's awesome, man. Thanks for sharing that. Like I'm getting some really interesting ones here as I start putting these together. You're not the only person certainly who has a story sort of like, I mean, yours is interesting in itself. They're all unique, but there's a pattern to some of this stuff. And I can say I have one position in my past, and I had an interview with some people I'd be working with, some peers, and we did it remotely. We did it by Zoom or Skype or whatever we were using at the time. And so I had my computer obviously to do it. And they asked me a question that I didn't know the answer to. But I'm a pretty decent public speaker, and I can kind of keep things going, and I can multitask. So while I was working towards the answer, I was Googling the answer. And I found, the right documentation. I'm like, yes. And then I subtly looped it in. So I answered the question. I didn't like read a page. It would have been too obvious. I answered the question right. I didn't have the knowledge in my own head. I had it in my own head by the end of the day, though. I mean, it wasn't
honestly,
like Citrix. I didn't have to word a whole
half our
thing,
job
but
comes down to being resourceful.
that's right.
That is,
if you can answer the question,
figure
you're
out
good.
how to figure out the problem.
Yes.
That's the question. A lot of people don't want the people's memorized road. They want the person that went outside and like did a measurement and like figured out how to problem solve, right?
That's
and didn't have the
right.
answer right off the bat because they looked it up.
Yeah, the guy that interviewed me might have known. He may not have. I don't really know. But I think that's the key, right? Can you find it quickly? Can you get me the answer I need? Might have been all he was looking for, and I was able to do that obviously subtly in a way that nobody, I don't think it wasn't obvious. I don't think they actually ever knew. So, and then I learned that stuff like you. I'm sure you went and dug into Citrix and you knew it very quickly. And that's what I did. I was like, I'm going to need this for the job.
Yeah,
so
actually, I was surprised how easy it was. I mean, I didn't realize it was mostly just a UI thing. I was a Linux kid back then. So this was like, okay, whatever.
Nice. All right, man. Listen, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much, for coming on today and helping me get this podcast going. And, I couldn't thank you enough. We'll have you back for other things. We could talk on a lot of other topics, obviously, along the way. But thanks for taking the time. Lance James, CEO at Unit 221B, and obviously a good friend of mine. If you're looking for some of the things they do, I highly recommend checking out their website, frankly. These guys are amazing. You mentioned Allison Nix. I got to get Allison on here. I'll reach out to her. Allison's way smarter than both of us. And I just got to figure out what we can have on here that I can hang in with her at all, or I should just get out of the way. Probably she's just too smart. But
honestly, just let her go at it, and you'll
I want to. She takes out bad guys all the time in amazing ways. So I want to.
She's probably the best hacker hunter I've ever met. So
probably, if you say so, I'm sure that's the truth. Like I think she's brilliant. So I want to get her on here. But today it was about you. Thank you for coming on, man. I really appreciate you being here. I appreciate you as a friend. And I'm looking forward to talking more. But that's it for this episode of Unspoken Security. Until next time, thanks for tuning in. Looking forward to sharing more and having more conversations down the road. Thank you.
Feelings mutual, brother. All right, have a good one.
Buddy.
Thanks.
That's a wrap for this episode of Unspoken Security, brought to you by ZeroFox, the only unified external cybersecurity platform. If you enjoyed this episode, follow us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. See you next time.